Welcome to SaaS Backwards, a podcast that helps SaaS go-to-market teams to accelerate revenue growth and enhance profitability. Our guest today is Sri Ganesan, co-founder and CEO of Rocketlane, a customer onboarding platform that shortens time to value and helps you deliver a collaborative, transparent, and delightful onboarding experience. Hey, Sri, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Ken, thanks for having me on today.
It's a pleasure. This is a great topic, and I'm really excited to dig in. But before we do so, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself and a bit more about your company, Rocketlane?
Sure. So Rocketlane is my second venture as a SaaS founder, third startup that I've been part of technically, and started my journey at Verizon as a product manager. One thing led to the other, moved to smaller and smaller companies, eventually starting up on my own with a couple of friends. The last venture was acquired by a company called Freshworks, which did exceedingly well, went public in 2021. And a lot that we learned on that journey is what we are putting into practice at Rocketlane and how we're building the company. Rocketlane is now close to 5 years old as a venture. What we do is we provide software for various kinds of professional services and services teams that do project-based work. And what's unique is we are one of the few solutions that I would say is looking at this as an all-in-one solution for a services team that handles both the front end of the business, which is how you're working with customers, collaborating, executing together, the governance around your projects that you're running, all of that, including like a beautiful customer portal. And also the back end of things, which is how you run your operations, your staffing for a new project, tracking efforts, invoicing a customer, doing your revenue recognition the right way, and so on. So all in one platform to unlock, we call it our trifecta, your people and your projects and processes, your finances and people, and your customer experience all in one tool.
Well, having great onboarding experiences can make a big difference in the economic outcome for the partnerships, right, on both sides of the partnership. So I'd love to dig in deeper on that as we go through our episode today. But first, I think it'd be interesting to understand sort of how you went from the big company movie, which I also did, started at IBM and Citicorp. Like, how do you go from the big company movie to startups? And what are the things that happened early in your career that kind of drove you to become an entrepreneur? Because a lot of the people that listen here, they're considering the jump. They're not all entrepreneurs yet.
I think, when I try to nail down what drove me towards the path I'm on, I think in a way, if I had to sum it up very simply, I would say it's the joy of creation. Very early in my career, I think even before I started my first job, I assumed that writing code is what I enjoyed, like, coding up new products. Then I realized that creation of the product was something that I enjoyed. So my first gig with Verizon was as a product manager for their set-top box software, Fios TV set-top box, and then moved to a company in India called Rediff.com. It was the first .com from India, incidentally, and was a product manager there as well. Then I went on to head product for a very small startup. And that's the journey where I realized it's not just creating products that I enjoy, but also building the team, creating the culture of the company. I was involved in everything from finding office space for the company to, hiring people, launching the first version of the product. So it was a journey that I cherished. And I thought, hey, it's this act of creating something out of nothing, which I really enjoy. And so came together with a couple of my very close friends to do our first startup back in 2014.
My early career, I was like we call an engineer now also. And there's definitely more to it than just the coding, right? Getting people around a vision, realizing something that changes the real world is a big part of what makes that a lot of fun. Talk to me a little bit about like lessons learned in the first couple of young companies that really informed the startup of Rocketlane. Because I think, especially if it's your first startup, you're not going to anticipate everything that you need to do to be successful. Even in your second or third, you may not have everything. But what are the most important lessons learned you brought into Rocketlane?
Yeah, I think the first startup I was part of as head of product, we had great traction. We launched a mobile app. It had 6 million downloads in the first 6 months. Things were going really well. And then that momentum, that confidence is what led me to do the first startup, which we started with a B2C product, which had 10,000 users in the first 6 months this time, right? Instead of 6 million like we experienced before. And that taught me something about how hard it can be if you don't have the right pull from the market. And, we eventually launched a B2B product, which still had, I would say decent momentum, good logos on board as customers. But when we went into Freshworks after we got acquired, that's when we understood what true momentum for a B2B company can feel like when you're winning customers every day, when there's like growth and really a different kind of speed at which the organization grows or has to grow to service the customer demand. And the biggest takeaway from both of those experiences was market trumps all else. The single most important thing for you to do is validate the market you're playing in, how big it is, how much demand there is going to be for what you're building. So we actually spent a few months, I would say, just validating our idea this time before we got down to building anything. That's probably the biggest lesson. There are many, many other lessons that we've taken away from that journey. I said market trumps all else in terms of like when you look at all sorts of factors which are going to influence your success as a startup, the most important thing to get right is, am I picking the right market? You don't even need to have the perfect product. I think, the market will pull out the right product if you're in the right market. So that was the biggest lesson.
I just think about my experience looking at, average software that did really well. And a lot of times it was early in a market, right? You don't have to be first to market, but be early in a space. And you do get pulled in as the market starts absorbing solutions, right?
Yeah, if you're playing in a big enough market, you can also find a big enough niche within a big market. And that helps you arrive at what your product differentiation is when you spend enough time learning about the space, learning about the jobs to be done of people. So it's, I think, a lot of upfront work about understanding, validating the jobs to be done of the potential buyer, the potential user for your software. And as you go through that journey, you will uncover areas where you can truly differentiate. And that's been super useful for us in our current journey, like a very sharp positioning. We started narrower than what we are today, got a lot of success over there, then started broadening the TAM that we go after.
Well, I want to ask you about that initial product because, as I understand it, was pretty full featured out of the gate, not really an MVP. So, what gave you the confidence to build a pretty robust solution, sort of as version one?
The first version of the product wasn't full-blown professional services automation. It was playing in a category called client onboarding. But as you said, it was still very, very full featured for that category. It was a new category. But the unique thing about this category is that it was like a unification play where we were bringing together, people were using spreadsheets, project management tools, documents, Slack shared channels with the customer, emails, etc., to collaborate across companies and get a customer onboarded, right? When you're running a implementation project or onboarding project with a customer, there are a lot of channels around which you're collaborating. Some of them are communication focused. Some of them are like, how do I send a status update? Some of them are tracking things between the two companies. Some of them are for feedback from a customer. What we decided to do was to build this all-in-one platform, which has project management, document collaboration, templating, feedback, and CSAT natively built in, a Slack style communication experience between the customer and you. There's a customer facing portal, there's an internal view. The two are different. The customer portal is easier to use. The internal view is more robust. And then, of course, you need your reporting, analytics, all purpose built for these kind of teams that are running customer facing projects that are repeatable in nature. What can you learn from your repetitions? So all of that needed to be in place on day one. And we can't go up against the project management tools that are more mature with something that is 20% as mature and try to replace it, right? So we needed to get fairly mature in terms of our capability set on day one within each of the pieces, whether it's document collaboration, project management, communications, etc. Then stitch it all together into one unified experience as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess also with project management, I mean, a lot of these professional services things probably look more like task management, right? This is the recipe to do these different things. They're not really very ornate projects with multi-level Gantt. It's more like make sure you get all these things done. So probably not insurmountable at the outset anyway.
I think the size of the customer determines the complexity of the project, and actually the size of the customer determines the complexity of the project often. That gave us a little time to continue the maturity journey purely from a project management perspective. The interesting thing we did was we went on like 120 calls through the course of a year where we were building out this product to do like demos of what we were building without the product being ready, without giving it in their hands, and to collect feedback, to observe what caught their attention, what did they like about what we were presenting. Very often, this was mostly click-through mocks, not necessarily the product itself. Parts of it were the product that we built out, parts of it were click-through mocks. And we told folks, hey, we're not trying to sell you because we're 6 months away from launching anything anyway. So just jump on the call, go through this with us, show us how you're doing things today, and we'll show you how we plan to go about building this. So those who were interested showed us a lot. So that helped us understand how manual things were today for them, what were areas where we could add value when they showed us their current process. And then when we showed them our demo, even though it's not a real product, we could assess their reactions and know if we are on the right path, where should we put in more focus, etc. And there's a very specific reason we chose not to give an early version of a product in their hands. We wanted it to feel like when they get it, they already see the full vision of the product, not part of it. Because if you give them part of it, they're going to take it down a path which they're more used to. Versus if you give them your full vision, then they understand the trade-offs better.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's a way to sort of start building some momentum and, as we'll discuss in a minute, community around this as well, right? Why don't we talk a little bit more about what's needed in professional services automation? You focus on client onboarding and professional services management. So what are those top problems to be solved in this space? I'm not sure people have thought, if they haven't been exposed to it, they might not have thought about it. And how did you solve solutions that solve things that didn't exist in the market yet?
I think people put up with siloed systems today, right? They believe here is what is there and here's what I can use. So they just put up with it. So what we figured is, what are the areas where we can add true efficiency and intelligence for our customers? A good example could be, I am running a project. It's a 100K budget to run this project. And mentally, I have some heuristics around when I finish the solutioning stage, we should have probably consumed 20% of the budget by then. But when I'm actually tracking my efforts in a different system and tracking my project in a different system, you don't get to easily tie that data together of how much effort got spent in what phase of the project. In Rocketlane, because you do it all in one place, we are able to configure early warning systems that tell you, you just finished discovery, you already spent 12% of the budget, you should have been at under 7%. So maybe a leader needs to pay attention over here. I think one of our biggest insights is when it comes to client-facing project delivery, the ball is in your court always as a vendor. And you need to actively be thinking about, how do I get warnings and signals early enough from a system so that as a leader, I can jump in faster and resolve situations. I can, pull in the right stakeholders from the client side as well to figure out a situation versus waiting till it escalates and comes my way as an escalation. So I think that's a big area that we focused on to build a lot of automation around for the system to flag risk, the system to flag problems early. And that's something that's really resonated with our client base. The other thing, of course, is, every team, every department prefers to use one software for tracking all of the things that they're doing. And I think our view is when you provide this unified experience, it creates a lot of efficiencies by getting rid of redundant work. A lot of teams operate without true understanding of their capacity, supply demand on the services team side. And are they using spreadsheets to do things very manually? But when you tie together project management experience with automated resource management experience, if you change your project schedule, you don't need to worry about, hey, did I also go and update my spreadsheet? It's automatically taken care of. So those were the kind of things that we uncovered when we looked at what are people doing manually today that we can go in and replace? What are they not able to do because of lack of all-in-one software?
And, all-in-one definitely on trend, right? If you think about the kind of the state of SaaS today, so that definitely plays in your favor. But I think we should talk about your actual go-to-market strategy around community. I feel like this is an underappreciated play, and you started building community even before the product was ready for launch, right? Can you open up a little bit about how you did that, what your approach was, and the tangible
Sure.
benefits to Rocketland of being community led in no small part?
Absolutely. Happy to chat about that. I think, you know, the idea sort of started in an organic way. As I mentioned, we were going on lots and lots of calls with folks in this space to validate what we were building, to showcase demos, etc. And we were asking people to open up their playbook. How are they doing things today? One of the things we figured was a lot of the leaders who were passionate about the space, they had uncovered different areas where they had made a lot of progress in their space. A couple of examples could be someone did a really great job of what they did in their kickoff meetings, which set the tone for the rest of the project, really set things on the right path. Someone else would talk about how they, in their enterprise engagements, have like a steering committee meeting that runs a certain way, which is helping them with the right outcomes with those clients. And we figured that there's so many tips and tricks and best practices that all of these folks have, which if they share with each other, it would make for so much more learning. And so we just happened to by chance invite one of those leaders saying, hey, do you want to talk about how you went down from like 6 months of implementation to 2 months of implementation? And they said, yeah, sure, I can do a session. And so we posted about this on LinkedIn and in a WhatsApp group and got a lot of responses saying, hey, I'm interested in hearing the story. Did that online session. And part of that session, I just said, hey, by the way, there's so many questions coming up in this session. Maybe I can create a Slack group and invite you all so you can continue the conversation. And that's how the community really started, right? So it was very organic. Like 21 people joined that session, 17 of them joined the community. And then we started inviting people to join the community. We would do 2 sessions like this every month, and we made it a prerequisite to be part of the community to join the sessions. And it just started snowballing from there. By the time we launched 8 months later, we had around 800 people in the community by then. Today, we have more than 4,000 people in the community. So it's grown, it's taken a life of its own. There's a lot of learning for us from the community, a lot of content that we take, repurpose, and use as well, because whatever we learn, we want to share with everyone. So we make it into like posts, ebooks, etc., that we are able to share. But also we're able to borrow ideas from there to influence our product. So I think a lot of great ideas have come from our community. It helps us look like a thought leader in the space because we're truly learning from people all across the globe who are doing great things in their function. And we are, resharing those learnings with a wider audience. And I think more than us finding customers from the community, which also happens, I think the community adds much more credibility to who we are. And that's how I see the value of community. It's the learnings we get, it's the influence it has on our product. And it's also how we get seen in our space as someone who's unique because we're sort of leading with community and thought leadership.
So you're encouraging learning among the members of your community, right?
Absolutely.
Is there any formality now to this community? Is it organized and administered, or is it still kind of just this single cell organism?
We do have a community manager, right? And the idea is to keep this as a space where people discuss these topics. We don't want, someone coming in and marketing something. Even we don't push our product into the community. In fact, I would say for the first 2 years, probably no one knew that this was from Rocketlane. It would say powered by Rocketlane on the website somewhere, but inside the community, we never talked much about Rocketlane, and it was all intentional. It's about creating that space where people discuss things that are important to them, not to create a space where we go and sell. And I think that's helped shape it a certain way. It still has a life of its own. The community manager, of course, hosts events and shines a spotlight on good work that people in the community are doing, shares the learnings, and so on. But that's about it, right? We do restrict who gets into the community. We want people in the function to be in it. We don't want, just people who want to check out any and every community to come in and join. So we're careful about who we let in.
Sounds like a great asset, not only to Rocketlane, but the participants. It's a really great laboratory for you and them. Tell me what the symbiosis is there between the Slack community and Rocketlane TV and your annual conference. Do they overlap at all? What's the play there?
Yeah, absolutely. The play really is, in a way, every company needs to think of themselves as a media company in the future. And that's what set us down this path. Once we saw community taking off, we said, hey, what more should we be doing from an audience building perspective? And what more do large companies that are creating categories do? We want to be seen as a category leader. So what are the other things we should be doing for the space? And conference was an obvious one where we said, hey, there is no conference for customer onboarding as a space. In fact, even for professional services, there isn't like a dedicated PS person only type conference. People end up going to customer success events and so on. So we saw that as a big opportunity for us to own an event, like the biggest event in the space. So we launched the first 2 years, we did this purely as a virtual event, but last year and this year, we've gone into a physical event as well. The event is called Propel. It's happening in the Bay Area this time, May 14th and 15th, 2025. Rocketlane.com/propel if anyone listening is interested. But yeah, I think the idea was, how do we bring all these great thoughts and inputs we're getting from the community and amplify that to a larger audience? And how do we shine the spotlight on people doing great work in the space that can inspire others who are attending, listening to these events, right? So that was the purpose of the conference. Again, it's not a Rocketlane themed conference. It's very much for people in the space. It's very much thought leadership. So I think that's worked out really, really well for us. We had some very, very interesting conversations and topics that we've covered at Propel over the years. This year, the theme is, we're calling it the Intelligent Delivery Organization. How should teams look to become more nimble, smart, and radically efficient given what's happening around us with AI, etc. So it's been fun building that conference and community. Rocketlane TV it's more like a Netflix of our own. We wanted to bring a novel experience for consuming all the great content we're creating from community, creating from the conference, creating from many other, we host a podcast as well. Also give an outlet for third-party content creators to get more visibility, right? So instead of just putting it up on YouTube, here is a very focused destination for people in professional services. If you have great content for PS, add it here, and more people who are interested in the space will find it. So that's been our approach to all of these media properties of sorts that we're building.
Hey, I noticed that the super early bird for the conference is probably expiring just as we're recording. Do you want to give a promo code for the SaaS Backwards listeners to maybe extend that early bird?
Yeah, we can do a SaaS backwards 15 promo code so that people get an additional 15% off if you want to register.
That's great. So we'll put that in the show notes too for people. Thanks so much. Looks like a very worthwhile conference. You want to give people a little bit more on what they experience as they're at Propel 25?
Yeah, so we're going to have leaders from companies like MongoDB and Palantir and many other popular tech companies who have professional services and implementation teams as the primary speakers at this event. And the idea is to showcase teams that are doing very, I would say, groundbreaking work in terms of how they're intelligent about their processes, how they're intelligent and smart about how they're automating a lot of work that used to be done manually. Also, how they're preparing their organizations for the future, how they're rethinking roles in a delivery team, given I think every function is in a way having to reinvent itself this year. And I don't think while a lot of professional services teams are actually working on implementing technology and AI for their customers, very often they're not doing it for themselves. And we wanted to make this event something that will, shake them up a little and say, hey, look at what's happening around you. You need to pay attention. You need to jump on this bandwagon.
Awesome. I want to get into the subject matter itself as sort of the last thing we talk about on this episode. And in our prior conversation, you mentioned that a gigantic amount of churn is decided really in the early days of onboarding and using a solution, right? The beginning of a relationship kind of defines how it's going to turn out. What are the specific strategies, and is there data that you've uncovered that helps your customers to improve onboarding and to reduce the churn associated with that beginning of a relationship?
Yeah, I think the very surprising statistic I heard was 97% of all churn at first opportunity, meaning when the first renewal timeline comes up, is decided in the first 3 months of a partnership. And when you think about that, these first 3 months are where the customer experiences what it is to partner with you, and they almost instantly decide, hey, is this a good vendor, good partner for me to bet on, or am I going to struggle with them? And very often it's down to even how you kick off with them, or the earlier in the journey is where more judgment happens, typically in any relationship or partnership. And after that, it's either them saying, hey, you confirm my judgment, or oh, this is an exception if you do otherwise. So if you make a good impression early on, then even if you make a mistake, it's seen as they're usually good. They made a mistake now. If you start off on the wrong note, then the first mistake is a confirmation that, hey, we made a wrong decision with this vendor. We need to part ways. And hence that lot of focus needs to go into how you do things very early in the journey. Be super careful. Have a very neat playbook of how you execute with customers. The more thoughtful it is, the more impressive it is, the more you can teach the customer early on in your journey, the more they will rely on your partnership. So I would actually say engineer those teaching moments into your partnership very early. We do some very interesting things around that, even in a kickoff call with any customer project. How prepared we come to that kickoff call, what things we do to impress them in that, which they go back with, oh, we should be doing this as well with our customers, right? So we want to leave them with those kind of ideas. Share one example. And this is something I learned from our community, where one step in our process that we outline for our implementation projects is that we'll say, hey, after you go live, after a month, there's going to be a reverse demo that your team does for us to show us how you're using the product. It helps us assess how our training was. It also helps us assess if there are any other quick wins we can help you with. And this resonates well with the customer, and they go, oh, maybe we should do this with our customers too. So that's the reaction you want from them early on in the journey.
So I think that's a great pearl of wisdom right there, the reverse demo. Any software company could really benefit from having their customers demo back, not only, from the standpoint of helping them use the software better, but they may uncover reasons why that you haven't thought of, right? The capability's there, but you haven't really emphasized it. So the reverse demo. Sri, thanks so much for that. That's the reward for going the distance in this episode. If people want to learn more about Rocketlane or reach out to you, how can they do that?
I'm Sri Ganesan on LinkedIn, sri@rocketlane.com on email, Sri Krishnan G on Twitter. Hit me up and happy to be in touch and help out with anything I can or learn from anyone I can.
That's fantastic. And if people want to reach me on LinkedIn, they can LinkedIn/in/Ken Lempit. My demand generation agency for SaaS is called Austin Lawrence Group. And if you haven't subscribed yet to the podcast, you can do so wherever podcasts are distributed or on YouTube if you'd like the full video. Sri, thanks so much for appearing on SaaS Backwards.
Thank you for the opportunity again, Ken. Enjoyed chatting with you today.